So, what is branding? What is online branding at all? It's the practice of creating something unique and something consistent around an identity that you place on a digital system of some degree. It could be a social media, it could be a website, but it's something which is pretty consistent and pretty unique that really identifies you aside from other people. And it also builds some level of recognition and a bit of trust as well. It distinguishes your brand from others in the market out there so that you're not confused with anybody else. And it's very clear what your offering is in comparison to what other people's offerings may be. The benefits of a strong online brand include the increased visibility. People can actually see who you are. They can see what you're doing, and that gives you something of an edge against your competitors. Where most small businesses are not very good at branding and not very good at presenting that brand in a way that helps them to gain new clients and new customers. And that naturally then gives you a greater reach. It allows you to get in front of more people because you tend to be shared around. If there's a brand that people can identify easily and then share on, that does tend to happen. It gives you a bit of enhanced credibility when there's a brand in place rather than just a set of words. And I'm talking more so about, rather than just a word like it's G&J Builders or something like that. If you've got a brand such as, Darwin Builders or Territory Homes or something like that, then you've got a little bit more enhanced credibility, not because the name's better, but because the name isn't just somebody's name. It's a name that creates a real picture in your head of what that may be. And then there's increased customer loyalty as well. The ability for you to be able to have people come back to you because they recognize your name and they're able to get back to you because they know where to find you. Now, a real world example could be Apple. Look, they're renowned for a very sleek, very innovative design. So you can always see an Apple product. I'm on an Apple computer right now. I've got an iPhone over there. I don't have an Apple Watch, but I've got a watch that is from another brand. But Apple is very good at making their brand known very well. They have certain standards in place. They have a certain brand position they've got in place. So it's not difficult to know what is Apple and what is not. I just guess that there's all the copycat creations of products out there, but none of them quite get that same level of seamless compatibility that Apple does. Amazon's another one. They're known for a very customer-centric approach. Might not be very good for the suppliers who work with them, though, but it is a massive product range with a very simple way of conducting the distribution of those products. I know that, for instance, even in the very top end of the country, that I can order something on Amazon. It's not going to take very long to get here. And I pay for Prime as well, which generally makes it faster. And it's included with my my yearly subscription to Amazon Prime as well. Nike we all know of because they've got their very strong brand identity because it's linked to athletes, pretty much athletes that have an inspirational story to tell of some way. They link themselves with people from Colin Kaepernick, who was the beginning of the kneeling to the national anthem in the US, right through to more local examples like Kathy Freeman, for instance, looking at their place not just in sport but in our cultural identities as well. Coca-Cola, really, really simple one, very consistent, hasn't changed. They're very, very the same. It does all they do is maybe change the color of the label from, red to black, but the Coca-Cola logo always remains the same. And that gives it really easy global recognition. And now for probably well over 100 years now, that has stayed in place. Something you probably don't notice is that the excuse me, the shape of the Coca-Cola bottle is that shape because it's made to mimic the shape of the coca bean. So that's the bean that the extract is used to produce some of that flavor of Coca-Cola. Well, the coca bean is roughly the shape of the Coca-Cola bottle as well. So I bet you didn't know that, hey? And Tesla. They're known for being very innovative, for having a strong online following, people who really believe in the Tesla mission. And, you see it on number plates around town. The amount of people have got, clever number plates that indicate that they are somehow part of some sort of secret club because they've got zero emissions and they've got a Tesla and they ride off the innovative brand by showing themselves as innovators themselves. So these are real world big business examples, but this can be just as much in small businesses as well. So how do you then develop that brand identity? Well, certainly we're not going to go into the nuts and bolts of it because every single situation is going to be a little bit different. But we've got some principles here for you though. Things like your vision. what are your long-term goals and aspirations, and how do you see that, as the future of your brand? So tying into things like we're here for this generation and the next would mean that you're literally trying to make yourself here for the next generation as well as the current one. Or if your vision is to save the world through innovative design, then everything you talk about will have some link back to what that vision is. So vision is not one of those funny things where it's like, oh, vision and mission and values and all that so fluffy. It's not at all. What it is, it's like a piece of framework. It's like a frame, literally a frame or a template that shows you, what you are in every single case. So you can look back to this document or this vision or this written statement about your business and go, oh, that's who we are. I've got to make sure that everything I write about, everything that I provide from now on fits into that vision. A mission's similar, but it's all about your purpose and your primary objectives, how you're going to achieve that vision essentially. And it's what your brand aims to achieve every day. So if that's in providing great customer service, then what are you doing in every situation to provide great customer service? If you're looking about sharing culture, then what are you doing every day to help share that culture so that your name or your business's name is indelibly linked to the act of sharing culture or customer service or innovation or whatever it is you're doing? And one of the core values, and this is one I usually start here because this is usually I've got, it's different thing. I've got companies, I've got sole trader over here. The sole trader side of me is all about really sharing what those core values are. And that's especially important when you're you're just starting out. This is where it starts. So you identify, I could read what's on the screen, but honestly, let me talk about what I think it really is. Your values are those things that you represent every day, whether it's a good day or a bad day, you're still going to show up as those things. So for me, I've got 5 of them. I usually say just get 3 because they're quite, sometimes they conflict, although some of mine just sort of overlap. So authenticity, honesty, vulnerability, effectiveness, and approachability. They're my 5. I know them so well because I repeat them over and over and over again. In my head, I'm constantly repeating them to make sure that I'm actually living that out. So before I go on this call, I go, am I bringing my values onto this call today? Am I being me, or am I being some, plastic corporate thing that isn't really me at all? So that kind of thing just prompts yourself to go, am I bringing my true authentic self on here today? And that's where that authenticity comes in. You're only being authentic if you're bringing your values in there today. Now, they're not aspirational. They're not saying reliability when you know damn well you're far from reliable. You're always 5 to 10 minutes late to everything. That's not reliable. That's an aspiration, not a value. If it was a value, you'd be on time all the time. It's just, or at least 98% of the time anyway. So just identify what they are, because they are going to guide how your brand behaves and how you make decisions around that brand, and how you express what it is about your brand. So what is brand voice and personality? This is the outcome of what you're doing. So you do something which is going to obviously reflect what your audience is. So whilst they have values and you have values, you tend to have values in common. And that audience is going to help you to say, okay, this is what they value. This is what I value. Here's where we overlap. Great. That's something that really forms part of what we're talking about to each other. The tone then is reflecting your values and the mission in the way that you communicate. So if you're going to communicate in a very professional, very formal way, because that's one of your values is to be professional and clear. Well, that's great. But if one of your values is to be friendly and approachable, formal and very legalistic terms of how you explain things is probably not the best way to do your communications and have a tone. The consistency means that you actually keep that going across all your different channels, whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn or your website or a radio ad or a television ad, whatever you're doing, or a letter or an email, that there's the same voice and tone that comes across in all of them. I'd also say that you would have consistency of that voice and tone on each individual channel as well. If you're not going from 1 minute your business is having a rant about something that they don't like, and the next minute you're saying, hey, we're warm and cuddly, come into our lovely cat cafe and cuddle a cat. That's not consistency if you're going from really cute and cuddly through to aggressive and nasty in the next minute. So that consistency is really important too, which is why I say have your values. If you're someone who speaking out and speaking up is part of your values, then that makes sense, obviously. But you're not going to do that all the time. You can't make a business just on speaking up and speaking out all the time. The storytelling part is where you're creating sort of a very relatable story, but it doesn't have to be your story. And this is where I think a lot of us go wrong in storytelling. We think that the brand storytelling has to be the story of us, as if the story of our brand, our business, how we formed. And I've got to be brutal here, but no one cares. No one cares how you started your business. What they care about is the problems that they have and whether they can get them solved. That's all they care about. So the story needs to reflect what they care about, not what you care about, what they care about. It's your brand story, but your brand story is actually reflected by what your customers want to hear, because after all, they're the ones who are going to pay the bills for you. Now, some of the techniques for the consistent visual identity could be things like having a decent logo. Now, this I would say when you're first starting out, this is probably the last thing you're going to do. Like going and getting a logo or having a logo made for you or obsessing over a logo, that is not the first priority you need to find. It is not. But when you go and do it, it needs to be clear and simple that's easily recognizable. Now, look, honestly, this logo is not going to be of the level of Apple or Amazon or any of the great McDonald's or Coca-Cola from day one. Your first logo is probably my first logo I just made up. I got a copy of Photoshop and I just sort of hacked together different shapes to form this hand that then had a C in it. And look, it made no sense to anybody. But when I changed that logo a couple of years later, no one really noticed. One person did, just one person. And she said, "Oh, I liked your old logo better." That was one person. And that person didn't even reflect who my customers would be. They were just someone who was also an advisor and a consultant just like me. So really, they were not really part of the people I was trying to appeal to. But now nobody really says anything good or bad about the logo. It's just part of what comes through on an invoice or on a piece of communication. But you do need to make sure it aligns with your brand's vision and values. So if you're in a very formal professional space, you wouldn't have a hand-drawn logo. But there, if you're in a creative space and what you're doing is very creative and cultural, then what about your logo reflects that as well? Another thing could be a color scheme. Now, again, this is not the most important thing, and there's all sorts of color theory around saying, well, blue is the color of trust, green is the color of nature and calmness, and red is like an urgent color that makes you want to act right now. Look, honestly, that will be a very cultural thing. I think it's a very, very Western white cultural thing to call those colors those kind of things, unless you're only selling to white women in one part of the world of a very, very specific kind of age demographic. Maybe that could work. But the reality is that different people see colors differently. My brother's favorite color is green. My mother's favorite color is pink. My favorite color is purple. So it's like, but we're all similar kind of temperaments and we're very, very similar kinds of backgrounds. So we have very different ways of approaching things. Look, the key here is not so much that you need to pick a color or a color set, but it's once you do pick that color or color set, use it consistently across things. Make sure like, red and green are very hard to work with because if they go onto a black background, they don't look quite right unless they're the right kind of color in red and green. So practice really with those colors, making sure what that color looks like on different backgrounds, whether it's a busy background with lots of, detail in it, or whether it's a white background or a black background, or it's just look at what it looks like in different ways. And think of this too with colors. Stay away from gradients if you can, simply because they're very hard to embroider onto a shirt. So if you need to embroider a logo onto a piece of clothing, gradients can't really be embroidered very easily. So try and go for solid block colors. And the same with your logo too. Something which hasn't got too many tiny little lines and dots on it. Make it something which can be printed, it can be embroidered, and it can be reproduced very easily. Next one's your typography, and this is fonts really we're talking about. So they've got to be readable, but also align with the brand's character. So using Comic Sans may be appropriate if you have maybe a comedy business, but honestly, it's not going to be looking very professional for those who are looking for you to consult to them apart from being comedy consultants, right? So you want something that's easy to read. Lots of scrawly, scriptish kind of fonts are not easy to read even for native English readers and writers. So try to look for something which is very, very clear for people to read, particularly in the body and the heading text of your website and of your social media and all those. Going into graphics, for instance, you just want to make sure things are easy to read because things are very highly scripty and highly stylized, can be difficult to read, particularly from those who are from a different language speaking background. And use a consistent typographic style in all your communications. If you're using Arial, then in your body text, then you probably wouldn't use then Comic Sans in a body text in another document. Just be consistent when you choose your formats and your fonts. Just use them consistently across all your different materials. Now, the imagery is where you're using, specific visual elements to support your brand's message or your business's message. And thankfully, these days, things like Canva make that quite easy for you. So you can look at all sorts of templates that are there. But what you need, again, is to have something cohesive and consistent across all of your visuals so that it can be very easy to tell that it's you. And it also creates a level of trust if people know what they're getting. Now, that said, overly branded things which have, you see this on LinkedIn and Facebook all the time. They have to have their colors and their logo, and then it's their photo, and then it's like their hashtag, and then their business website address, and it's over branded. There's too much going on. Try to simplify that down. Usually a color or a font on that color is enough to identify it's you. You don't need to load up every single thing with your logo, because let's face it, we are surrounded every day by thousands, tens of thousands of logos throwing, and we cannot remember any of them. We just remember the main ones, and they're really because we've grown up with them. We see them around us every single day. We start to recognize them. If you're a sole trader or just a very small business of your own, honestly, it's not going to matter how repetitious your logo is and how cohesive your visual style is and how many times you put your brand on a single Canva graphic. It's really just simplify it. Just keep it simple. Have a color, have a font, maybe throw a logo in here and there, but I wouldn't be putting more than one or two elements that match your brand into any kind of graphic you're making. Now, the strategies for building your online presence are around really, how do you get people out there to notice who you are? And SEO is very, very important. And it's a practice of improving your website's ability to be found on Google, for instance. It increases all that natural traffic coming through to your website without paying for ads because your website ranks higher, right? Now, where brand comes in with this is that people don't always search for plumber Nightcliff. They may be looking for your particular plumbing service that they know is based in Nightcliff or somehow serves Nightcliff. So what I'm saying here is that you need to, yes, make sure that if you're a plumber or that you're a cultural service or that you're a copywriting service, that people can find you as a copywriter in your local area or your local city or your local town. But you also need to be found for who you are. So that if that's your name or your business's name, you need to make sure that you've got some kind of optimization within your website that allows you to be found. Now, SEO, the whole other topic, I'm not going to go deeply into this because there's so much you can do with that. And then with the rise of AI at the moment, SEO has all changed. Google's all very different to what it was even 2 years ago. So SEO is very, very different. That's a whole other subject for another time. Keyword research for SEO, that's identifying using the relevant keywords. Like I said, your brand name, the thing you do, maybe your name that is findable. Using things like what we call on-page optimization, which helps you with tags throughout your website. Honestly, I'm not going to go deeply into it, but these are things to kind of consider. The mobile friendliness, for instance, making sure your website is able to be not just responsive to being on a mobile, but it's actually viewable and usable on a mobile. Sometimes they just reshape and stack things up, but it's just completely unusual. And then there's things like your page speed, making sure your pages load nice and fast. So, things like Wix and Squarespace and WordPress generally do pretty well on that. But it might be worth, running a test, a page speed test somewhere. Go, okay, if I'm talking about clarity in my brand and convenience and service in my brand, if my website takes 15 seconds to load, that's not clarity, convenience, or accessibility, really, is it? That's actually the opposite of that. So your brand values aren't playing out on your loading of your website. Now, next to social media, this is probably where we know branding from most. This is where we're posting regularly to maintain some kind of visibility and some kind of connection with the people who are following us. Now, we all know that about 2% of the people who follow us ever see what we post, right? So really what we're doing on social media is not so much trying to reach people, but it's when people refer you to their friends, to people in a group, that sort of thing. When they land on your page or land on your profile or land on whatever your group or something like that, it's very clear that it's you and it looks legitimate, it looks consistent, and you've been engaging with it nice and regularly over time. So yeah, a brand isn't just simply just putting out graphics and writing stuff, but it's going, well, I'm actually going to do this regularly, especially on social media. We don't really rely on social media to generate a lot of business these days, apart from it being referred to from people who've like specifically referred you, right, to a friend or to a family member or someone that they've been chatting to. You might have an audience on social media. I know I have a bit of an audience on LinkedIn, very, very small on Instagram, and a bit more over on YouTube and TikTok. But it's the engagement with people that really helps that brand to be consistent. If you think that your brand values include something like being approachable and accessible, and you don't answer comments on social media, your brand values aren't matching up, right? So, a few tips for creating content that's also within your brand values would be to use pretty high quality images and videos. That's really high quality videos is a little hard, I'll admit, but high quality images, you can't really go wrong with that. Just take great photos. We've got these super cameras on our phones these days. They can take good photos. Just do these two things for me, right? Really watch that the lighting is good where you're taking that photo. And secondly, wipe the lens. Just it's amazing what you'll do. I've got a friend who consistently takes the worst smudgy photos all the time because she does not wipe the back of the lens. All it would take for her is to wipe the back of the lens. And I told her, wipe the back of the lens. She said, oh no, I don't like wiping the back of the lens because if it's all smudgy, it makes my skin look more smooth. I'm like, oh, face palm, face palm. There's so many apps that can help you with that. Those high quality images create some sort of credibility and legitimacy in you that you're not just somebody who's putting up a fake profile on Hinge or Bumble or Tinder or something like that. You're actually legitimate, right? So ensure that those visuals, even the photos, have some link back to your brand. So it might mean that there's like a little logo on the bottom right hand corner or something to indicate that this is yours and it's connected to the rest of the material you've been posting across social media. Having some interactive content. I'm not big on polls and quizzes, to be honest, because I don't really think they are very, very effective, and I think they can be very, very annoying on most social media. I know in LinkedIn, for instance, polls have been really just deprioritized down very low because of how annoying people made them. Questions, on the other hand, can be a good way of getting people to interact. So just asking a question at the end, not just agree or what do you think? Ask a very specific question that then opens up conversation, not closed questions such as, do you agree? And people will say yes or no. We want something nice and open. So it'd be like, what would you do if this happened to you? Or what would you do if you ran out of your X product? Yeah. And then they're able to answer in that way. A call to action can be good. I don't like using them too much because a call to action also makes things very salesy. There's this theory in marketing which says, unless you tell people to click on something, they won't click on something. People aren't stupid. If you've got a clear message and a clear thing that you solve for them, they will find you and they will click and they'll find your number or they'll find your website. They don't have to have a little prompt every time to do it. People are not that stupid. I think we've got to give people credit. They need something done, they'll find the way to get it done. And they want to do it with you, and you've made it clear that you can do that, and you made yourself available to do that. They'll find you. They'll know how to do it. Value-driven posts is a way of really just looking at a social media very differently. And the brand values you'll come across with are going to be shown through this. This is where you share really, and I'll say not informative and relevant. Let's just say one word, helpful. Helpful content, stuff that helps them. They see you as a specific expert in a specific field, and they won't always need you. But when they do, it's very reassuring if they see that next post come up that's helpful in solving the kind of problems that they will regularly come up against. Provide solutions to common problems or questions that you know that your customer or that your client will have. So that's if most of you are in services that tend to be on these calls, some of you are selling products as well. Every product solves a problem. Every service solves a problem of some description. They won't all be life-shattering, earth-changing, life-saving problems. Some of them are very just small problems like, what should I do this weekend? Well, how do you solve that? Tell us about that. Content creation and marketing. Well, content creation really is a lot about that social media stuff. And we've covered quite a bit of that, but I would say that, we can create content around blogs. We can create content around videos. Videos really are the highest priority thing these days. And not all of us are going to feel comfortable about going on a video, but trust me, it's worth learning. I recently did it myself and had hundreds of thousands of views on these videos. And it's just mind-boggling that people want to watch a video with me on it, but they do apparently. Infographics are really kind of cool, not as good as they once were at getting attention, but I find LinkedIn is very good with some kind of diagram or an infographic. Podcasts are really great. There's still huge listening to podcasts. I think what's happened though, the podcast system's become very fractured, and there's all sorts of different places you can go to get a podcast now. But podcasts are not that difficult to do. If you feel like doing a podcast, I would say make sure that you commit to at least 20 episodes, because I think it's like 90% of all podcasts don't get beyond episode 3. So if you even produce 4, you're in the top 10%. And that goes to show you how people just get bored of doing it because they don't see a result straight away and they go, oh, I don't want to do it anymore. It's not working. Well, of course it's not working. No one knows about it. So you have to spend a bit of time on podcasts. You have to spend a bit of time on video. Yeah, in blogs, you have to spend a bit of time on it. What do you put in those blogs? That's another topic for another day, but I've got a October Business Month event happening. I think it's about mid-month where we're handling, what to write about and how to write it. And that's the sort of thing you can build into a blog, a video, and a podcast because it applies to all those things. Because after all, writing is the beginning of videos, writing is the beginning of speaking on podcasts, and the beginning of social media posts as well. So I'll be covering that as well. Blogs, they're very good for finding you on and what you are an expert at on Google. But that said, it's a very, very saturated place right now. There's so much AI content on there that's sucking up all the views. So, is that the place where you should be putting all of your attention? Well, I think you still should put some attention there. It's very good for creating a sense of your thought leadership and longer format educational content as well. The videos are very highly engaging. They really see it's a multi-sensory experience, I guess. They can read the caption and the subtitles. They can see images that somehow get their attention, and they can hear what's going on as well. So that is helping with retention of information a lot more than just simply words on a page. You can use it for tutorials, demonstrate the way you do things, tell more stories around who your clients are and what you do for them. But the whole idea here is not to get on there and start selling yourself. It's not like, hi, it's Dante from the Darwin Innovation Hub. You should sign up for all of our things right now because that's what we do. We help people. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, solving a problem. So I would come on here today and say, oh yeah, I want to work with you to help create your startup. That's not what I'm selling today. What I'm selling today is information about branding that can help you get started. So a webinar is another way of doing this. I know I haven't mentioned it there, but webinars are a really good way of doing this. Infographics, really easy to digest. They look good. They're very, very engaging. Social media posts, we know what those are. So brand updates, oh God, like it'd have to be something really, really important, like a new product, but just a brand update, like, oh, we've now released another size of this. No one cares. Honestly, no one cares. We changed the packaging. No one cares. There's so much that no one cares about when it comes to what we care about in our businesses. I know I follow a person on LinkedIn and Facebook, and oh my gosh, every update is like, I've changed my label, I've changed my ingredients, I've changed this. I'm like, no one cares. Just tell people what this does for them, not all these weird and wonderful ingredients. No one cares about that stuff. They really don't. Content creation tips. Let's throw in a few. Have a compelling hook. Write something really attention grabbing at the very beginning of anything you're doing, whether that's a post on your website, a post on social media, whether it's the opening line of your video or the introduction to a podcast. Just be really super compelling. If you need to look it up or get some help with it, use something like ChatGPT and say, turn this into a more compelling, engaging hook, and it will do that for you. Have a clear structure. Have, if it's a blog, have headings and bullet points to help break up all that information. But also in a video, have a start and an end, and in between have some very defined points you're going to talk about. Use your visuals, include images and videos to help people to understand things through that multi-sensory environment. And then just maintain that consistent tone. Make sure that it always sounds, feels, and looks like you, or at least looks like and sounds like and feels like your business. It's when we go all sort of over the place and we don't really know what we're doing or try too many things too quickly that we really go off track. Give your brand some time to breathe. Give people a chance to recognize you. For me, it took me about 3 years before people recognized the brand at all, or my name, or anything like that. And now that alone, people will look for me via reputation or via name. And that's what you want to be able to do. You want to be able to create that situation where people look for you, not for what you do, even though they're really looking for what you do. You want to engage with your audience. Look, you got to build one to start with. And some of the steps would include defining who you want to work with. Who are the best possible people for you to work with? And then what is the content that they would enjoy? Now, introducing your products to them is not content that they would enjoy. Again, be helpful or entertaining or somehow educational. But telling people about your products and your services is not educational, it's not entertaining, and it's not helpful. I know you want to get all that off your chest because you want people to know what it is I do. But like I said, you need to spend time doing this. If you're building a brand, it's not about constantly putting out sales messages because they don't work. They haven't been working for you yet, right? So that is a long-term proposition. You start today and it may not be of value to you for another year. That's fine. You'll thank yourself in a year that you did it. Promote your content through whatever relevant channels are out there. For me, I don't do anything really on Facebook anymore because that's not where my clients are. It's not where they're looking for what it is I do. But LinkedIn, absolutely. YouTube, yep. On a blog, yep, absolutely. So, but I'm not going to go and do too much over on TikTok specifically, even though I can just reuse what I'm doing on LinkedIn over there as well. So just be really picky about where you go. You don't have to be everywhere, doing everything everywhere all at once. A great movie, but not a great way to promote your brand. And then engage with the kind of people who are commenting, who are seeing your stuff, who are, maybe reaching out to you. Just be a human, be interactive. Don't just sit there and just go, oh, what do I do? So the steps of sustaining an audience would be really to maintain a very consistent style. Make sure you're always asking for feedback, asking for interaction, just asking questions, right? You can nurture community through those shared interests. People who have an interest in what you're doing likely have an interest in the kinds of things you're doing as well. So this is where you can share a little bit about yourself without getting too self-conscious and too obsessed about it. It's really about saying, well, if people want to use this skincare product that I sell, maybe they're also interested in, natural living and meditation, something that you like that you think they might also be interested in as well. And then adapt some strategies based upon that audience and how they interact with you, because you can't always predict how they're going to interact. So what you want to do is leave yourself flexible enough to make a few changes along the way. I'm not talking about wholesale changes to your brand, but it's maybe some ways to which you will be able to communicate with them in a better way, or somehow, be able to create some kind of way of using that feedback and using those analytics to work out what your next steps forward should be. Because there's no point, even though it might be on brand, of doing this thing over and over and over again if it doesn't work. So this is your chance to look at something that you're like, okay, that worked. Let me do more of that. That didn't work. Even though I really like doing that, it doesn't work. So I'm not going to do that anymore. Just use those tools to really inform you on what you should do next. Influencers can be really powerful when it comes to your brand because they help to amplify it. So if you can find people who also match the people you're trying to reach, or they might even already be talking to the people that you want to reach, they're your ideal people. And they're usually micro influencers, not the Kim Kardashians of the world and the what's his name? Ryan Reynolds and all those superstars. And you're just looking for the mums and the dads and the people who are movers and shakers in the area that you want to be in. If there's someone who runs a networking event in your town, and you want to reach those people, hey, get in touch with that person who runs that networking event because they have the key to the kingdom that you want to be able to get into. Make sure those collaborations, though, are not cringeworthy with someone who usually is like a mom who's really into natural living. You're telling her to promote your, I don't know, your plastic bags. Like it's probably not going to be a good match, right? So make sure it just does match and produce content that resonates with not your audience, but their audience. Remember, you're going to them to get to their audience, not your audience. So don't dictate how they are going to work this because they know their audience way better than you do. So if you start making lots of demands about brand authenticity and all that sort of thing, make sure that you leave them lots of room to be doing what they do well, which is engaging with that audience. And of course, use all the feedback tools and all the stats and the statistics to measure whether those engagements with influencers are going to be good. So building a strong online brand is not just about visibility, it's about creating an authentic identity that resonates with your audience and stands out in the digital landscape.